Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started with the planning board meeting. Again, I'm expecting Brad and or Adam to join in. We'll be keeping an eye out for them if they come in on Zoom land. All right. All right, I don't see any attendees here, so no privilege of the floor here, and no one has come in on Zoom, so we'll skip privilege of the floor. So that brings us to the minutes from the last meeting in January, which were sent out. Any comments, changes, corrections to those minutes?
You made.
Not to those, it was a miracle.
Oh,
I did find one typo you missed somehow, but yeah, it's the first time ever that I haven't had a note from Barb. So, the previous one we had some corrections on, so. All right, so hearing none, any objections to those minutes? All right, so those are approved. Michelle, town board report.
Well, I guess not much has been happening related to, that would be affecting the planning board. We do want to tackle some changes to the zoning law later in the year, but I don't know when that's going to be.
Okay.
So at the last meeting, we did things like authorizing contract for the trail work, authorizing the bid contract for the town hall renovation. So those are what's being worked on now. That, and then broadband, of course, is a big thing.
Any update on the broadband? I know they're working on rolling out further this year.
Yeah, I don't have any updates about that. It's just you can see they put in that building, which is to hold equipment for it by the new town hall.
All right, so, all right, I'm gonna try to.
So does the town council have everything that they need from us, the planning board, for the zoning revision discussion?
So that, yeah, the only thing for that is do you see that Brad wants to get let in?
Okay, I don't, yep, thank you, I will do that.
I mean, maybe I've got the power to do it, but.
No. Try to figure out why.
Yeah, as far as I know, we do.
Progress.
This is related to the changes to the mobile home law, right? I mean, getting rid of that and then just making changes to zoning.
Yeah, I think that's what we worked on. But you guys haven't talked about anything else that you want our input on, then I take it.
Not at the moment.
Right.
And they haven't talked about changing the name of the committee or anything like that yet. I think they are going to tackle the thing about changing the zoning to prohibit possibly. This hasn't been discussed yet really by the full board. So data centers.
All right.
I don't think that affects the planning board, does it?
Now, if you guys just go ahead and do it. Actually, I hadn't mentioned to Mark yet. I sort of brought up in here one time that potentially that issue is something we would look at next. But if the board has its mind made up, then we don't need to do that. So
we don't have our mind. I mean, it's just come up recently because of Dryden just banned them.
Right.
So
yeah, I should probably have a conversation either with Mark or with the board, and is whether you guys would like us to look into that. I think originally, because this is where things were going in Lansing, I was thinking we might be looking at what to do sort of in general. But then I know in Dryden there was a lot of pushback and they went with a simple ban. And so there's anything from a ban to a moratorium to putting in, safeguards, at any rate. Not an issue that will directly impact Caroline likely anytime soon, just because again of our limited voltage electric capability. But anyway, maybe I'll shoot Mark an email about that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, I have to leave a little bit early. I'm kind of in the middle of a project that's got a deadline, and so I hope I'm not forgetting something I should update you on. Can you think of anything else?
I do not know. I have not been in the state for a long time, so I was lucky I remember to come tonight, so.
Yeah, so it's just, we've just been doing other stuff like related that wouldn't call
Yeah,
on
no,
the.
only if it's relevant to us is
Yeah.
anything you guys want us to know about, so.
No, I can't think of anything right now, but if, yeah, I'll let you know if there is something.
Okay, great, great. And when you need to check out, that's fine.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to insert 2 items on the agenda, though with Adam not being here, that may change things. Left over from previous meetings, we had a question about, there was a note in the solar law about flagging environmentally sensitive areas prior to construction. And Guillermo had suggested putting a flagging distance in there. Adam was tasked with looking into that, and I think he came back with 50 feet at one point, saying that's what DEC uses around certain things. Anyway, we had never talked about that. And so I think I will once again put it off because we don't have him to say, here's where I found that or what that means or anything. I did do a little poking around, and I think they use anywhere from 50 to 100 feet. But basically, part of that is with 100 feet of a wetland, you have to get a permit. It doesn't say you have to flag that far out or you can't work. You just have to get a permit to work in that area. So I don't know what a safe distance is. All right, I will postpone that one to next meeting. And then I wanted to bring up what I hope is a short topic because it's something I learned in our presentation last time. What I think the presenter called dynamic agrivoltaics, which is the active tilting of the panels to help the plants out using, inputs of monitors. Potentially something we would add to the, designed hope fors, not the standards, but the guidelines, the things that would be good to do. So I'm going to insert that after the commissioning, recommissioning discussion. And if we get too bogged down in it, we'll just punt it to the next meeting because I'm throwing it at you guys. But I thought it might be something I just have some wording that I throw out there. So there's a new item on the agenda, which that's gone, will be item 7. And that brings us to the committee meeting wording, which I sent around. Barb made some suggestions. I implemented those suggestions. Do people need to see that wording? I can, if I'm lucky, pop it up on the screen here. But that won't help.
I think you sent that around and that looks fine to me.
Okay, any other changes or issues with that? Okay, so if not, we will do that. All right, and then finally, then that brings us to the screen planting things. And again, Bob, thank you for the resources you put out there. And I'm going to now open up the discussion. Essentially, there are a few topics. So there are design requirements that we may or may not want to make. So first of all, there's a question of do we require screen planting at all? If so, do we, and if so, what are they have as actual requirements for what the screen planting has to do? There's another aspect of it which has to do with the maintenance schedule, because there was an arborist supposed to go in the first 2 or 3 years, and Guillermo flagged that as well, maybe that person's becoming longer. And then finally, if we are putting some design requirements in, that might cut out some things that a qualifying agrivoltaic facility might want to do in terms of screen planting with fruit trees or whatever that we need an escape valve for them. And as I noted in our the email I sent out, really everything's in there now is just guidelines. And so nothing is disallowed. Even though it says native plantings are desired, it doesn't mean you couldn't because it did say you had to. So it also begs the question of do we need to say anything more at all? So with that intro, I'm opening it up for discussion of what people want to say about screen plantings in the solar law.
Well, one of the things that occurred to me when I was reading about screen ideas is that there were some references to berms berms, like earthen berms, which wouldn't necessarily, they'd likely be vegetated, but not necessarily with trees. Or shrubs, I guess, for that matter, and the berm, could be low or high. But there was also mention of slatted fences, and so, I guess I'm a little bit concerned about being too prescriptive because, as I think Will made this point in her comments that, depending on time of day and everything, the glare varies and, where you are and how high the road is from where you're looking at it and all those sorts of things. So, I'm more inclined to think about just requiring either calling it a vegetation screening plan or just a screening plan. And have them identify what it is that they're going to do to, surround this place, at least on the sides that are, abutting roads or residences. I'm not sure that we would even need to think about requiring screening on a side that abuts a current woodland or something like that. So, that's my thought, require a plan, but then that leaves some discretion to the review board as to what's appropriate for that particular site.
Okay. And do we indeed leave it to the review board, or would there be something that says, nearby residences and public use areas such as trails, and Brad, you see your hand up, sorry, should be screened, or we leave it totally up to them?
Again, I think I would say some type of screening on areas that are abut roads or residences, or to your point, recreation trails, within some distance. I think that's a reasonable thing to do. But again, keeping it not prescriptive. I mean, you could include language that would be, e.g. earthen berms, deciduous vegetation, conifers, native grasses, whatever, list a lot of examples of the kinds of things that could be considered agricultural crops, whatever. So it's implied that the review board should be open to considering, a lot of different options. But again, they would do so in the context of whatever that particular site is.
Okay, Brad, you want to say something?
Yeah, my thoughts on screening is that, why are we requiring it? That's the first question I think needs answering is before we say, are we going to require it or not? Why would we require it? Is it for aesthetic purposes, or are you trying to affect some sort of protection, let's say, as Barb said, from glare or some sort of hazard? What is the goal here? Because otherwise, I feel like now you're getting into aesthetics, and I don't know if solar fields are necessarily aesthetically displeasing, like it's a landfill or some real industrial site. Because you're talking about something that's spread over sometimes, 50 acres or whatever of property. And so even if you planted a few shrubs along the edge of the land parcel, what really are you accomplishing with that? So I think that's where I'm stuck on screen planning is what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to accomplish just an immediate aesthetic impact to the immediate neighbor who then can only see that 50 feet? So you want to block their view, but then are you then worried about blocking their view? Because there was comments that were flown back and forth about the view shed. And well, if someone, let's say, puts up a solar field south or down the hill, let's just say down the hill from you, and you have this great view over a valley. Well, if you require a solar field to put in shrubbery or trees between that neighbor and the solar panels, now those trees grow up and block your view shed, and maybe the neighbor didn't want that. So again, I go back to what are we trying to accomplish with this requirement?
I think, if we decide to do it, there are generally two purposes. One is aesthetic, that some have voiced a desire, to shield it from view. The other is safety, which is glare, as Will pointed out, if you're near an airfield, for example, but definitely people have talked about it on roadways. So, there are two purposes. One is aesthetic, one is safety. Glare is an issue, is a difficult thing necessarily to quantify or tackle because, it does depend on the panel construction and our anti-glare coatings. It depends on the season because of the position of the sun changes with time of day and with season. So that's not a straightforward, yeah, because, oh, glare, but obviously it's only certain times, certain places. And so how much rigmarole do you go through for that? So I think, those would be the rationales.
And then again, who decides what's aesthetically pleasing? Like I just said, if you require some sort of screening and then that neighbor, his
Right.
view shed is destroyed because you required that screening.
So my take on it is along the lines of Barb, but what should happen in the developer developing a screening plan is that they develop in conjunction with the neighbors. I don't know quite how to phrase this because as Caleb, thank you. You knew I was thinking of the C name. Said to us, some people don't mind it, some people do. So it seems reasonable that and maybe the developer would say, "Oh, I'll put a bunch of pine trees in." And other people say, "No, we like some maple trees," and they'll be very happy with the maple trees, even though sometimes they can see through them. So it's ridiculous for the developer to have to guess what would make the folks happy. So if we can figure out a way to word this, and today we're just doing principles, then we'll do wording in between. I would favor something that said screen planting plan, to meet whatever, somehow to meet the needs of the neighbors, and perhaps the review board can take on the role of being the neighbor that governs like a public trail. And then the review board has to approve it. But if folks say, we don't need it, it's not required. Something like that, flexibility, as Barb was saying.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges, I like the idea of requiring the builder to get input from, I think the language that we used in the community meeting was something like adjacent, abutting, and something else.
Right.
Adjoining.
Adjoining, abutting, and adjacent properties. I like the idea of getting input from those properties. However, I could see like two neighbors who are both adjoining, but are right next to each other. One might want pine trees, one might want maple trees, and maybe one wants nothing. And so that is complicated. But life is complicated. So I don't see a downside from requiring the builder to seek input, but not requiring them necessarily to do what the landowners want, right?
Yeah, I think that would be better is like just that, Barb. What you said is require them to take into consideration those neighbors' opinions, whether it be at the community meeting or what have you, but not require a specific plant screen because, like you said, maybe when you start talking about aesthetics, everybody has a different view of the world and what they find beautiful, and you're never going to please everybody. And so I think getting prescriptive and saying, yes, we require a screening plan for aesthetics. I think we could have some sort of language that says we need to require them to consider the adjacent neighbors' desires, and maybe if consensus can't come to a consensus or agree on a screen planting plan, then the default would be some sort of minimalistic, whatever seems to be the standard, vegetation screening plan. And then I guess my second concern would be, going back to safety would be, well, how do we demonstrate that, and what are we trying to to be safe. Obviously, glare on the immediate roads. Are we going to require something specific, or are we going to require, I think, something more general of them to consider using screening to minimize glare on immediate adjacent roads?
Yeah, I would say something like that, or in particular, I would, if we come up with language that sort of essentially tasks the review board with taking glare considerations into account in approving the screen planting plan. Because,
Yeah.
they're not gonna have the expertise, but either they or the developers have to hire someone with the expertise to calculate, oh yeah, this is the time of year when this would be an issue, and therefore you need something here, sort of thing. Yeah, glare taken into it. Okay, so what I have in sprawled notes is that, yes, there's gonna be a screen planting required. And it may indeed mention all kinds of possible things that can be used.
Yeah, and again, I'm not sure that I would say screen planting because.
Okay, so say
if they
screening
do-
plan.
Yeah, screening plan.
Right now, it gives, the language we give is screen.
Right, so I think we're gonna change that to screening plan.
Yeah,
Um,
so it's.
And it could be, I mean, if they want to do a physical barrier, consider that, that's fine, or vegetation.
Well,
So it's not necessarily planting.
the fencing is required.
No, but I mean, what
think
I've
it's not.
seen, what I've seen in some places is,
Like a large-
wood slat.
Maybe you're right.
So it's actually, it's not the, chain link fencing, it's, it's actually stuff that you can't see through. Now, that doesn't go high, as high as a tree might grow, but, that's one of the ideas that some solar fields have done, or at least have talked about.
Or, the chain link fence can have a windscreen
Yeah,
sort of thing
right.
on it, but I think we sort of discourage chain link fence anyway. But you're right, for the large one, that's probably required.
Well, yeah, it's a security issue.
Yeah, though in the agrivoltaic sense, sometimes the fences can be an issue too. You have to have them there. But yes, that they are.
Yeah, they're protection from creatures.
Critters, right?
Yeah,
Okay, so the principles would be that there's a screening plan. And then the language might mention a bunch of options, which are plants and non-plants. That the development of that plan should take into consideration the views of the adjoining, abutting, and adjacent landowners.
And maybe I
Yes.
want to say views, because views are like, seeing it, maybe that, the preferences or opinions or preferences.
So say that again.
So it's not taking into consideration
Okay.
the people's views, it's
Okay.
people's preferences.
Right,
Now,
right,
I'm just-
okay,
I'm just
right,
concerned that Views
Right.
implies like view shed.
No, and if I said the word views, I didn't mean to. I meant the views of as in their opinions. But
Well,
yes,
that's what I mean.
Yeah, take into
that's the view,
consideration,
yeah.
their desires of all these people of what it's gonna look like.
Right. Yes.
Okay, good. And in particular, I think, on the safety end and the review board should there be some mention that they are to, concerns, issues of glare and whatever should be taken into account, and evaluated by the review board. And, still probably say native plants are preferred. Okay,
Except what if it's an agrivoltaic
Right.
facility, then it would be agriculture plants.
right,
Are
so,
allowed.
right,
certainly.
so again, since the native plants preferred, I still would want to say something.
Yeah,
And then, for a qualifying agrivoltaic facility, something about, whatever cultivated plants are okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Other thoughts on these basic principles of what the design suggestions for the screening plan? All right. Do I have a volunteer to write this up? Or do I have to assign somebody? All right, let's see, let's come up with a meeting. All right, I volunteer myself. I'll give it a shot. And see where we go from there. Okay, moving on then. So we had this discussion about commissioning and what about recommissioning and all this sort of stuff. And as Will found out, there is nothing all that explicit about this in codes.
When it's ground mount.
When it's ground mounted, right? It's different if it's in a building, et cetera, et cetera. So this is, you know, obviously these large solar arrays are going to be ground mounted. So to that end, I threw out some wording, which needs help because it just was clunky and I had some blanks in there anyway. And so what I proposed was that we indeed, you know, add something that says, all right, if you've been down because there was a problem, or if for some reason you haven't run the facility in a while, then you should do this commissioning procedure before you know, start running, and you got to give us the report. So the specific wording was, in the event the facility has been out of production due to accident or damage, or out of production for 6 or more months. And I chose 6 or more months because that was also already in the law for some other related thing. I don't know if it's short time or long time for them, but all right. And for 6 or more months, and now here's the question, is it the operator, permittee? Who do we call this? At this point, you know, we're 10 years into the project. It's not an applicant any longer, because they do have a permit, so maybe a permittee is a good name. They're also the operator. What do I call them?
Operator.
Operator? Okay. All right.
Even though it's not defined.
Yeah, right. All right, so the operator shall conduct a system commissioning and submit a signed commission report to the town. Now,
It should go to the code office.
it should, we earlier said to the town and we could change it to the code office. I thought I was writing code officer until I noticed that the first commission report went to the town. Yeah, we can change them both.
Well, is it better to keep it to the town? Because, like if, you know, like the town board is thinking about changing our name, you know, what if they change the code officer's name? You know, title, I'm just wondering if it's better to leave it as the town, and then the operator can inquire who in the town gets this and send it to the right person.
Yeah, that part is defined. So, we could, well, I know we put it in the battery law about
That it should go to the code officer.
who performs the code officer type functions. Like if we have the code officer mentioned for several things in the solar law.
Okay.
If the code officer determines that the mitigation plan is not being adequately followed.
Well, if it's already in there, then
Yeah.
Yeah,
that makes sense then. Use that.
yeah,
Okay, thoughts from either Aaron or Brad, or in particular Michelle? Do we have any thoughts how the town board would like us to do this? Should we say to the code officer? Is it to the town?
Do you guys see a possibility of the name ever changing?
The code officer seems pretty been around for a while.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
strictly now called the code enforcement officer or CEO. We could take a look and see how it's defined at the start of the solar law, which actually I do have up here. So let me see if I can find it quickly.
Yeah, unless we're gonna change it throughout, we should be consistent with what it already refers to.
So, what it says, code officer is defined as the town of Carolyn code enforcement officer, as well as any hereafter appointed zoning officer or other person appointed for this purpose by resolution of the town board. So I think we're trying, you know, that was the covered butts there. So
Yeah.
I think code officer works, and I'll change it in the previous one of the previous citations didn't look for it in general, but I think that's where I saw that. Okay.
So, I just wanted to mention that, every time I go to pancake breakfast, the guy at the door reminds me that they have not received a single report from the code officer of any solar installations. And, it's a safety issue.
You are reporting to the wrong place. Bring this to the attention of the town board and the code officer.
But the thing is, it's also been raised at, town conferences in New York State. The code officers are increasingly tasked with more and more items, and the installer could be informing the fire department. It doesn't have to be the code officer.
Yes, if you want to think about that and make a proposal for the law, do that before the next meeting.
Okay.
I just want to deal with it right now because none of us know anything about it.
But I'll talk to the fire department.
Talk to the fire department? I don't talk to the code
And also-
officer.
Right, and Mr. Ray, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a question?
Go ahead.
Could you just repeat? I had to step away for a second. What were you just saying? Will, could you just repeat what you just said about the pancake breakfast and the code officer?
Well, the pancake breakfast is at the fire department, and the code officer is supposed to inform the fire department every time a solar installation goes in.
Is that a New York State requirement?
Well, that's another question I haven't pushed them on.
Because I'm not aware of that being in our law.
I've been hearing it through the years, like since we passed the law, they've all been like, why don't they ever tell us?
Hey, so Will's saying that the fire people are saying they're not hearing when solar systems are installed. They believe they're supposed to be informed. To be honest, I don't know if that's true or not, but look at our
Why
law.
don't
It is.
Yeah.
Because
Then why don't they,
Excuse me.
why don't they just approach the code officer and ask? I don't get it.
why would they do that?
Well, I mean, they could ask now and you could tell them, but I think the point is that going forward, there should be, if this is supposed to be happening, there should be a mechanism by which it happens. But this is not our fight.
Yeah.
I'm gonna move us on. If
Okay.
so that we're going somewhere else.
If there's a problem, they should approach the code officer and sort it out. I mean,
Yeah, reminding, he's doing it.
Yeah,
Okay, so, right now, what we have is, under consideration, adding the clause to the area talking about commissioning. In the event the facility has been out of production due to accident or damage, or out of production for 6 or more months, the operator shall conduct a system commissioning and submit a signed commissioning report to the code officer. Okay, everyone happy with that?
yes.
All right, that's done. All right, now is my inserted agenda item. So again, the thing that most struck me actually about the presentation last time, I hadn't fully gotten it, and maybe not all agrivoltaic things do this, that there are some of them in which there are temperature sensors and sun sensors and moisture sensors, and they put that to some sort of model with the plant growth and expected weather patterns and actively put the panels to benefit the plants at some cost to solar production, potentially, depends on the
Yes.
place. So I'm not saying places have to do this, but we have a litany of things where people can use partly translucent panels, or they can use vertical panels to make it easier. And this is another thing that, would be a beneficial thing. So I'm proposing perhaps that same list of what is currently 6 items, we had a 7th item, which would be, under a possible guideline to implement dynamic agrivoltaics, parenthesis, using temperature, soil moisture, and other inputs to actively manage panel tilt to benefit plant health and growth, end paren. And that would be the thing. Brad.
So before we get into all that, I would suggest that we review the feedback from the Ag Committee.
Okay, well,
Good point.
all right.
I'm just saying, because they were more in agreement with what I've been saying, which is we're way too structured and prescriptive in the design requirements.
Right, but you understand that this is a design guideline I'm proposing, not a design requirement.
Sure, sure.
We can dial down some of the design requirements if that is where we're going with that. But
Sure.
I'm just suggesting adding this as a guideline. So let's stick to that, and then we'll get to the other stuff. Unless you think it's irrelevant because they want to get rid of the guidelines too, but.
Well, yeah, some of them even wanted to get rid of the guidelines, but I don't know if guidelines or having the guidelines are necessarily bad, but there were definitely some items that they wanted to strike even from the guidelines.
Okay. I'm willing to flip. So I tentatively had us finishing going through the marked up law and then moving on to the Ag Committee. And I knew we'd be running into issues of potentially running out of time. I didn't know how long the Ag Committee feedback was going to take us to discuss. I'm open to flipping the discussion around if people think that would be beneficial.
I think if we're gonna mention anything about qualifying agrivoltaic facilities, that we should hear from the Ag Committee first before we have anything more to do with qualifying agrivoltaic facilities.
Okay, that's fine. Again, alternatively, we can skip this and just move on to finishing Guillermo's comments and then Ag Committee. So that's really my question is, do we talk about Guillermo or do we talk about Ag Committee next?
Does Guillermo's comments have anything to do with qualifying agrivoltaics, or have
I
we already
think kind of
covered
got
that?
through that, but I could be wrong. And if I'm
I
wrong,
don't
then
remember.
yeah, all right. I'm okay. We can go move on to the Ag Committee stuff now. I think that
You okay with
would be
that?
on the safer end. Aaron, okay with you? All right, got a thumbs up there. All right, so let's push that up to here and okay, so yeah, and I know that I think Will, you were in attendance at that meeting as well. Okay, so Brad, you were really our point man on this. So why don't you talk as a report, and then we'll go through things through section by section, I guess.
Sure. I mean, I guess I'll just kind of read, Erica did a nice job summarizing it in an email, some of our meeting, minutes, and then I added some stuff as well. But basically, again, making that sure that's more incentivizing rather than coercing or penalizing, and that we want to make the design as flexible as possible since not every property or every project is the same, right? They're so different. The land is different. The farming's different. Um, and since there's not really agrivoltaic standards in the US right now, it's, behooves us to keep it, open rather than more restrictive. That was the general feedback, but more specifically, some specific comments on it was there was talk about a no-mow zone along fence lines. They said that is just terrible because you want to as a farm mow along a fence. They said vegetative maintenance section is geared against agriculture and towards conservation. So one of my comments, I don't know, months ago was what's our goal with this? Are we trying to encourage conservation? Or are we trying to encourage agriculture with agrivoltaics? And of course, I'm a biased farmer. I'm like, well, let's support farming for agrivoltaics. Now, I understand that it's not always one or the other. A lot of the farmers also, were of the mind that, hey, the way in which I farm does support conservation. But when you put in the guidelines here, specific prescriptive things that you think should be done to encourage, conservation, I think it was very off-putting to a lot of the people in attendance. And so I think that was like, again, specifically 8.6 B VII. So 8.6 VII, the percent of solar energy facility devoted to agrivoltaic production, including the percent devoted to crop production, et cetera, et cetera. They wanted to kind of get rid of all of that. They
I
said
need you to
that's,
slow down there because, you know,
I'm
I don't
sorry.
have that. I know you're trying to read, so I don't have it pulled up. So you're not talking about, there was indeed a thing about, and remind me again exactly what it says about percent of crop.
Yeah, here, I can share my screen if that would be helpful.
Uh,
I have it pulled up. Let me see if it'll let me do it. Will it let me do it?
You might have to give him permission.
I try to give you, I gave your co-host permission, so you should be able to, but let's see what happens.
Let's see here.
Actually, I'll give you more superpowers.
Yep, I got it. Here we go. Share, send request.
All right, so I have to allow you over here. We
I
go.
love technology. All right, here we go. All right, I'll share the document. Okay. Do you guys see the document up?
Yes, I do, in very
Oh,
tiny letters.
let me
I
see.
see
That's not
something. That's your email or something.
Yeah, keep in mind, Brad, that we're all looking at a laptop screen because our big monitor isn't working in the building.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
That's okay, Bill can see it.
Yeah.
So can you see that now, Bill? It's a Word document.
I can, but you guys aren't understanding, right? So yeah, so okay.
So basically, VII here, that talked about the percent of solar energy facility area to be devoted to ag production, including the percent devoted to crop production, the percent devoted to animal production, and it said may total more than 100% of animal production, blah, blah, blah. A minimum of 70% of the solar energy facility must be devoted to ag production. And so someone made some comments that should perhaps go, but what was it? Yeah, no, VII.
Hang on a second, just for clarification, that's to be a qualifying agrivoltaic facility, correct? Is that what
Right.
section this is in? Okay.
Yeah, this is in 8.6 qualifying agrivoltaic facilities. There's a hang up here on
The
VII.
70%.
I apologize. I was reading the wrong one. I was reading VII. So VII, the percent of solar energy facility area devoted to pollinator wildlife habitat may not exceed 20%. And there was a hang up on that for both, like, where the 20% come from and what does that mean, devoted to pollinator wildlife, because you know a lot of operations are mixed operations, and again, some of them felt that the way they farmed actually enhanced some conservation and whatnot. So
All right, so I'm gonna probably, you know, I don't understand basically. So, there was objection to saying that at most 20% can be pollinator habitat to be a qualifying agrivoltaic. Okay, because there are folks out there that desire to do more than 20% as pollinator habitat.
yeah, I'm not entirely sure, what was the hang up on that in terms of, I think it was again that everyone farms a little differently, and what are you calling what qualifies as pollinator and wildlife habitat? And what does the word devoted, what does that mean? That came up.
So, Brad, remember how the discussion at that point, people, especially Jonathan Bates, joined it. And the question was, what were the requirements directed at? And people were making the distinction between conservation issues and having good conservation practices versus having good farming practices. And Jonathan Bates was saying, well, there should be a distinction whether what you're trying to accomplish, because what you would do would depend on whether you were involved in conservation or farming. That was the context for a lot of what was being said, because
Right.
it seemed to be pushing farm plants to do conservation efforts that were counterproductive to farming. And,
Correct.
that's why they
All right,
came to that.
so, all right, so backing a half step backwards. So I can see how some of the suggested mowing practices would give the sense of, oh, this is a conservation oriented document. And it grew out of a resident's comment, gee, is that if they're doing mowing, is there a way to do it that doesn't hurt wildlife so much? So that's conservation goal for sure. But the whole point of this is to say, no, this isn't conservation. If you're an agrivoltaic facility, you're not supposed to be doing conservation. You're supposed to be growing crops. So that's why the 20% cap, and again, the 20% agreed was arbitrary to some extent, just some, something that wasn't a big number. But I'm a little confused because it feels like maybe there's misunderstanding there, that I would think that they might say, well, that 20% number should be either smaller because they want to do more farming, but of course they're not required to do that. So I am confused why someone's objecting to the 20% cap of pollinator habitat, because indeed this is not a conservation program, it's a farming program.
Yeah, so I guess my question, just again, so I'm trying to understand what the concern was. Did somebody want to have more than 20% of pollinator habitat as a farmer because what they're farming for is honey?
Right. Yeah. I guess a good question. And again, I don't know because there was all I know that we wrote down, jotted furiously down a lot of the various objections, not always the why it was objected to. But that was one that came up. It says implies that agriculture cannot also provide for pollinator wildlife habitat. And what they're saying is that this is a dichotomy that is not a real good dichotomy, since again, some farms do provide for that.
Sure. All right. So if the objection is, or we can try to fix it, but if someone says, hey, I've planted all this X that is my crop, but it's also pollinator habitat, and I'm going to run afoul of this, I think that that's a misunderstanding of the intent. It's like if you're only setting some aside as pollinator habitat, we didn't want that to be the majority of the facility.
Right.
So it's the whole point was, so if they have a crop that is also pollinator habitat, it would count as a crop.
Right.
Sure.
So if we need to clarify language, I think that's a good idea. I would hate to give that impression that,
Sure.
this is.
So that was one. The next one was 8.6 CI 1 and 2. So the design guidelines for qualifying agrivoltaic facilities. And let's see. They didn't like C1 or 2. So include both crop production and animal production in the agricultural production areas. They just didn't like that wording on one. I don't know why. In number 2, it says use wider row spacing to provide additional area for crops. Again, I guess these are design guidelines, perhaps not requirements.
Yes.
And again, I'm just providing you feedback on what they said. They said, these should be struck. They're useless as written, except for number C3 was good and should be included, which was the provide water access for crop irrigation and or animal watering. So they like that idea of having that in the guideline, but I think the general thought process on the guidelines was, going back to what Jonathan was saying, and I think I echoed it a little bit, was that there's just so much variability in the farming, in the land, and the way in which solar panels can be used, as you talked about the dynamic agrivoltaics. It just really depends on what you're farming. Does it really need to be wider? And what does wider mean? Wider than what? Wider than so many feet? Because we don't define so many feet. I mean, it says compared to a non-agrivoltaic facility, but again,
So
what
I
is that?
feel like like there was a fundamental disconnect then in understanding a standard versus a guideline at that meeting. Because that's the whole point. And wider means wider than they would have done if they weren't planting crops, right? In other words, you have a certain density of panel spacing dictated by the shading of the panels on each other, and whatever that is. That doesn't leave a lot of room for growing crops. So if you want to be agrivoltaic, one good thing you could do is space your panels out wider. So this simply mentions one possible way to do that. It doesn't prescribe it, doesn't say you have to do it. So we tried to give, so I'm trying to be too defensive about the law here, but it seems nuts that they would say, oh, that's a useless thing to say. Because it's not saying you have to do it. It's to give someone an idea of something they might want to do if they're trying to think about how to do it. I thought we tried to leave flexibility, so I'm confused as to where the inflexibility is.
Well, again, it came down to just what you said, guidelines versus requirements. And so, yeah, I'm okay with guidelines. But at the same time, I think even keeping the guidelines even more general to where, instead of being prescriptive and saying, well, they should be wider, X number of feet apart, simply having the company explain how does that spacing and design facilitate the farming that is planned. Making that explanation rather than saying, well, it needs to be wider, it needs to be taller, it needs to be flatter or vertical. Just say something more simplistic and general of that the design should facilitate in some form or fashion the farming that's planned to be there. Can that design accommodate a tractor if a tractor is needed for farming? Can the spacing accommodate enough light to pass through for the vegetation that is planned to be planted? Or, maybe they're using those solar glass from Bright Solar, which is like 20 to 30% shading, and so it's really hardly any shading at all. So I think that was kind of the pushback from a lot of folks was just that. It was that they felt it was too prescriptive, even with it being in guidelines. Now, I personally, I'm a little bit more with you, Bill. I'm like, hey, these are guidelines, these aren't requirements. I'm just, again, please don't shoot the messenger.
I'm relating some, believe me.
I'm relating some stuff. I'm in agreement with you in some stuff. I disagree with you on other stuff, but I do think having guidelines is fine. I do think we don't need to necessarily be super prescriptive in it, though.
So,
all right, go ahead, Will.
So listening to the whole conversation at the Ag Committee, I came away thinking it's going to really be important who the person the review board goes to analyze the farm plan. And then I found the stuff out on the NYSERDA site, and they also emphasize how important it is that you pick, I think they might have called it a farm monitor or something like that, to analyze the plan, because everything is changing so fast, and Europe is so far ahead of us, and people are hoping their developments come our way really soon. So I think we might put it out there as these are things that you want to include in your plan, and the monitor should be able to comment on how adequate they are. Something
right.
along those lines.
I think the one thing, and Will, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the one thing that everybody seemed to agree on was they did like having the last bullet point in design guidelines or under qualifying agrivoltaic facilities, Part D, all agricultural activity within the ag facility shall be conducted by a person or company meeting the New York State definition, except they didn't want it maybe conducted by, they wanted it maybe wording a little differently, maybe saying managed by instead of conducting.
Yeah.
But having that definition of farmer
So they were
being
fine with that
in
threshold.
line. What's
Yeah.
that?
They like that threshold. That was the key
They
question.
like the threshold. They
Very
like having it being in line with the New York State definition.
Okay, all right, so, and I think, again, we, in the description of the farming plan that we have somewhere, requirements of the farming plan, I think one of the items is show how it's feasible to grow these crops in this scenario, right? That thing you mentioned, I think we do ask for as part of the farming plan. And I agree, that's the bottom line,
Yeah.
right? The bottom line is however they design it.
Yeah.
It needs to support what they're doing. Yeah. And these were just some other ideas. So here's what I'm gonna say, Brad. I'm gonna assign you. And not saying we're gonna take it this way, but I want you to go through all these design standards and design guidelines.
Okay.
And rewrite them to what you think your impression is the folks in the ag committee would like.
Okay.
And then we'll take a look at that.
Okay.
And see, because because you're probably better, you heard it all firsthand. So rather than us trying to like monkey with it, and then we'll see if that looks good or not.
So is that not necessarily what Brad wants, but what the
Right.
ag committee wants?
Yes, it's not necessarily what you want. I want you to do your best to channel what you heard. Maybe it's gonna be a big deletion.
That's
But
all right. I already know you guys don't care about what I want. That's already been made clear.
no.
So
Hey, the whole
yeah.
reason the 10,000 farmer threshold was in there is because you really wanted it. So, and, so I'm serious. I think it might be useful exercise to go through, and then we can look at that and say, okay, we move this, or we'll tweak it, or stay with this, or whatever. Or maybe some way, I guess maybe just because we learned so much along the way, it felt like it was great to give some ideas of things that are good for an agricultural facility.
Sure.
I admit the person designing it may know way more than we do by that time.
Right.
And so maybe guidelines are totally superfluous and irrelevant. So why don't give it a shot, and we can trim things down. And again, I liked a lot of the mowing ideas that came out of that, but if that's a real stumbling block, maybe we can think of some other way to thread that needle. But the idea is that if you're doing mowing and not cropping, that's the point. That's when those guidelines and standards kick into effect. If you're growing crops, maybe we need to exclude that more. But and I think we did exclude a qualifying agricultural facility from some of that stuff. But take a look at another can at that, and if there's some way to make it clear that it's really only if you're, mowing because that's the maintenance that's being done, and not grazing or other agriculture, then you should mow with this sort of wildlife conservation in mind. And we can narrow it down that way.
Sure. Now, just to be clear, so you're wanting me to only look and modify things under 8.6 qualifying ag facilities, because there's a section, I think, also that was presented to them, 8.5 design requirements. Now, this is the design requirements also part of the for ag
so that was
facilities.
design requirements in general for any large solar facility.
Okay,
So
and
not-
I think that was also perhaps part of the hang up was there's confusion over when you were looking at design requirements and vegetation maintenance, they're talking about mowing. Well, that might not have any relevance to an agrivoltaic facility, right?
Right, it
Because-
does not. So I'm trying to say, if we need to make that more clear,
Yeah.
we should or can, because yes. So you should look at both of those. But yeah, the point was the mowing was for a place that's doing vegetation management by mowing, that
Right,
they should do it in this way that is more conservation minded.
right. Okay,
If you're
super.
growing crops, then you have a different set of stuff you're doing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have to leave, but I'll check the notes, the
Okay.
minutes, and see what I missed. Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks.
You know, some of these grazing operations have been pretty stable and gone on for a lot of years. But it's, I find it really hard to imagine someone being able to present a plan that goes beyond a few years. In these facilities are designed to be operational and productive for 25, 30
Right.
years.
Right.
And we have no, what do you do if you need to change your plan?
Well, it does
Right.
say there's gonna be significant changes. They have to submit a new plan, I thought.
and I had a thought that we should, I mean, and I think the
Yeah, I missed it.
screening plan could similarly, you know,
Yeah.
5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, they might need to change something. So the farm plan you can change, but for the farm plan, it does say if there's gonna be a significant change, just resubmit the plan.
I think I lost the email.
Yeah, 'cause no, there's no way you
Yeah.
could know 10 years from now, the cropping that is gonna be done. I mean,
Yeah.
even if you know.
Well, for the
Works.
really large facilities, they only make 10-year commitments to the ISO. So, yeah. So ours is going to push it through on a 10-year plan,
All right,
which is also ambitious.
so, all right, so Brad will take a gander at that, and I'll think a bit about it too, but again, it may just be a matter of, again, backing off, because we don't need to give that many guidelines, if that was somehow, you know, scary, but you know, again, I almost feel like I want to hand the review board a document saying, here's ideas that, you know, they should try to implement. I don't know how to do that and communicate it through the law. So, you know, if there's anything otherwise they're gonna lose. I mean, I'll blame them, I would too, right? I mean, you don't remember you have that unless you're looking at, when you're looking at the law to evaluate a place. So that's why it's in there, and we will think more harder about that. Okay, and so I was proposing, you know, just the general concept, the idea that if we're gonna have design guidelines to be seen, you know, another one to maybe mention would be this, you know, dynamic agrivoltaics. Is it worth mentioning? Is it not? I guess that's the question. What do people think?
Again, I think dynamic agrivoltaics is fantastic idea and some technology. But again, do we want to necessarily do anything other than just adding to the guidelines? I mean, to say that you know, this is something for consideration.
All I'm proposing is be in the list of things for consideration. That's what I would
Right,
propose.
right.
No, I think that's appropriate. I mean, I think we need to, you know, recognize that there's probably other things that are gonna happen in the next 10 years that aren't going to be in that list, but by putting that list in there, you're at least giving, you know, some notion of the kinds of things that you should
I don't think
be-
it hurts. I
Yeah,
don't think it hurts anything.
Okay, and we should make clear that that list is not exclusive, that you
yeah,
say.
exactly.
Okay, and you know, and Brad, yeah, I know, the frustration at this end probably stems out of some of the zoning fight, that there was always this consternation if you put something in, and you ask the question, why are there guidelines too, right? That you put a guideline in and it was commonly taken as, why are you making us do that?
Right.
Which is the whole point, that that's not something that's being you made to do.
Well, I agree with you, Bill.
No, I'm saying that you do.
I'm
and
I'm
so
I'm in
I don't
100%
know how
agreement
to-
with you on your rationale. I think it is sound rationale.
But the flip side is, you know, back before this whole zoning stuff started, we had a site plan that was worded much, you know, because we didn't have the teeth to make anything stick, that had basically design guidelines basically on things. And there was a couple projects and people were frustrated the town couldn't make them do something. And, you know, there was a guideline in there and someone thought they could make them do that or refuse the project, and legally that's not the case. And so there's frustration both ways, frustration that's going to be taken as an absolute, and frustration that it can't be taken as an absolute, and why the hell then do you have guidelines if you can't make them do it? So, we've heard it all. All right, so I'm gonna bring us back then into, what time is it, about 8? Yeah, okay, so we got some time left here. To Guillermo's document. And I will try to share that. Let's see. That. But that's not gonna help you guys all that much. It'll help Brad and Aaron.
It's a good one. You have access to.
Yes.
So I have it here. Is it going to show up there? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so. All right, so we are in section 8. We've dealt with this community meeting thing. And then where were we? I remember where we left off. Okay, so screen planting plan. So now it says it has to be a screen planting plan. And so we've now talked about what that maybe is going to be. And so I think there would have to then be some language added here about what the screen planting plan is. Because the operation and maintenance plan has a few details to it, the next item. So that's what I'll try to come up with, is some details to flesh out the screen planting plan either here or I think there is design requirements. Okay, so it's probably they're going to really be under design requirements. So under design requirements, we've dealt with is fencing. Okay, so what it says about fences is they shall be permitted for the purpose of screening or enclosing. So that falls short of being a requirement. That's how I thought I remembered it, but I wasn't sure.
What section are you on?
Oh, so I'm in section 8. I'm in and this now,
8.5?
this is 8, I gotta zoom up, 8.5.
8.5.
Design requirements. And in there, we have, let me say height, okay, I think, what do you here?
In the current law?
Yeah, this is the current law. Let me get this smaller. So, okay, so, I just, again, I'm like 2 months out of date. My brain's not fully clicked in, but I know some of the stuff we dealt with. So for example, on 8.5D, talks about the height. There's a 20-foot maximum height, but we said in this meeting facility that can be exceeded for a qualifying agrivoltaic facility. And I do see a note here saying, yeah, we'll do the same thing here. So some of this we definitely have dealt with already, and I apologize for, I have to just figure out where it was that we stopped doing stuff. Lighting, noise. Okay, so all it says on screen planting right now is, this is L. Native species are preferred, a mix of deciduous and evergreen varieties is preferred. And that will all get changed to what we just talked about, if I can dream up some nice words. And I'll send it out, and then we're going to edit it, and then we'll plunk it in next meeting. And then what you were showing, Brad, was this revegetation and vegetation maintenance got split into 2 pieces. And so indeed, some of that only applied to people who were mowing. Stormwater management, yeah, we made that change too. So under stormwater management, we also changed something under the medium facilities, which had to do, and I'm not remembering, but we'll do the same change here. I think it had to, it allows bare ground cover temporarily for farming purposes. So stormwater management says that they have to be maintained with vegetative cover, but of course, if you're going to till, you can't do that. So we're making the same change that we made for medium facilities there. So we're starting to catch up, I think, with where we left off. Okay. Okay, so flagging was the question we had under medium facilities. It's more complex. The flagging requirement is more complex for large facilities. So here they state the limit of disturbance, the boundaries of any environmentally sensitive areas. And so again, we'll put some distance there for the boundary away from the environmentally sensitive area, nominally 50 feet. So I don't know, put a note. That's 6C.
Yeah, you know, the state just updated ORS and reinforced a lot of the environmental impacts and gave the DEC more permitting power.
Right, and that's for the super large.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, through ORS, anything going through ORS. So I'm just saying it's the trend.
yes. Okay. I think it was under operational requirements, probably where we left off. Okay, so that is it, because then, yeah, 8.7A is where they inform the code officer and submit a signed commission report to town. And we are now going to add one that's saying if they, are out of commission for a while. And okay, so here's where we get to. It says the permittee shall retain a qualified landscape architect, arborist, or ecologist to inspect the screen plantings for 2 years following installation, to identify and replace any plant material that did not survive, appears unhealthy, and or otherwise needs to be replaced. And I think that's one thing we did not get. So the question is, do we something different there? Do we say a longer period of time? Do we say for the life of the project? Do we, so I'm opening that up for discussion.
Well, there were suggestions that fast growing vegetation isn't necessarily desirable.
I can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
I would suggest maybe do they need to retain? Do you really need a qualified landscape architect or arborist to walk around and see if trees are dead? I mean, I could just say that it's that the permittee should do this maybe each year or every 2 years, but do they need to hire a specific landscape architect? Because I mean, I don't know. You don't have to be an arborist to see that a tree's dead.
Except it also appears unhealthy. So I think that to get away from, oh yeah, my brother walked out there and said it was fine. Yes, I think there needs to be some standard of the person doing it. Yes, I will object to removing that.
But we might not have screen plantings though, right?
Right. So it has to be that any screen plantings or something,
If screen plantings are used, the
Yeah.
permittee shall retain a qualified blah, blah, blah.
But then the question is, should it be for longer than 2 years?
Yes,
And then how long should it be?
life of the project.
That was sort of where I was leaning.
Every, inspection could occur every
2 to 3 years?
Yeah, I'd be willing to go, 3 years.
Takes a lot of diligence, doesn't it? Yeah.
And, okay.
I think I'm still getting hung up. Can we just say qualified individual rather than specifically landscape architect or arborist?
What does qualified individual mean then?
Yeah, well, what does qualified landscape architect mean? I mean, I think, I don't know. I just, that's where I'm getting, because like, what if they hire, someone from Green Scene, on Route 13? Is that they're not necessarily a landscape architect, but they're in the business. They can at least tell you your trees are dead.
I'm open. I just don't know if qualified individual is good enough language, but
Or some, I don't know, or maybe adding something else, someone landscape professional. How about that?
Or qualified, vegetation professional. I mean, it's.
Yeah. Just maybe say professional, but not necessarily architect or arborist or whatever.
Okay. Okay, I'm good with that. So we have qualified, what, professional or?
Yeah, or landscape professional or vegetation professional.
Okay. Got qualified vegetation professional written down.
Just so it's more inclusive, in case the person's perhaps not an arborist per se.
Okay. I think what we're doing is qualified vegetation professional for the life of the project every 3 years. Okay, got those
Cool.
notes in there. All right, and then, yeah, the next point has to do with the equipment and facilities, not using direct support, parking. We had an escape clause for farm vehicles, we used it before, we're gonna use it again. Which basically gets us to section 9. Abandonment and decommissioning of solar energy facilities. And I'm looking to see if he has any
Two
notes.
H, 9.2H.
H, there we go. All right. His comment is set specific inflation escalator in terms of periodic updating. Right, so there is one as he mentions, this is a 9.4.
That's my
Yes, so.
ending at 9.2.
Yeah, so he's got the comment there, so I think, so they're supposed to do they're supposed to put an escrow, 125% of the estimate, every 3 years.
We had a
Updated rate
a
cost estimate.
professional, someone professional setting the appropriate amount.
Yeah, so what 9.4 says, I've just skimmed it, is that that they have to basically update it every few years.
Yeah.
So that to me is an inflation escalator, because they has to make sure they stay above the cost of the decommissioning and site restoration. So I personally don't see a need to specify a thing further.
We really did a good job covering that one.
Yeah, no, I agree, because 9.2 says it's gotta contain the following, decommissioning plan has contained the following elements and should describe how the following requirements would be met. One of those requirements is to have a mechanism to ensure the periodic updating, so your plan is gonna describe how you're gonna do that, and then 9.4 has more details. So, yeah, fine with it as it is.
Okay, next comment he had is 9.3, the removal of solar energy facilities must be completed, by the plan. Okay, so it says if it's not done properly, the municipality can remove the facility and restore the property using the security that is required in 9.4 and impose a lien on the property to cover any remaining costs. And Guillermo points out that at this point, theoretically, the owner operator is gone. And the property is not under their lease any longer, and so the lien is actually on the landowner. Again, I'm sure this language came from the state, and so I'm not going to pretend that I fully understand it or its implications.
But I remember Guy looking at that and commenting on our language. I think he corrected something he said.
That would, on this or in the battery lot?
I thought it was on this one because it was the first time we created this kind of fund.
So I think Guillermo has a point there, if that lien would actually encumber the property, but the, facility owner is no longer there.
But what mechanism would there be to impose something on the operator who has now vanished?
Right. I mean, they may not have vanished, they may simply be done with it and moved on somewhere else, right? It might mean they ain't bankrupt, they just would be.
I mean, if there's, like what, you just sue them, I mean, I don't
Right.
know. What else you would do.
Right, but it might be that imposing a lien is not the right thing to do. That's what he's asking, I don't know the answer, I mean, maybe it's a question for Guy.
Yeah.
Okay,
Just in the experience.
okay, I will ask Guy. All right, and in the next, in 9.4, he points out should be letter of credit, not letter or credit, which is correct, it's a typo. And then I think might be his final comment, is that this letter of credit or bond, et cetera, that maybe we stipulate that it be held by the town and not by the developer site operator. Any thoughts from anyone? I think it's unclear who holds it in the wording here. If you need to read it, it's section 9.4. This is,
Why would you have to specify?
I do not know the answer.
I mean, that seems like a Guy question to me.
Yeah, that's what I would,
Yeah, it seems like, who holds it could change, like, business practices might change. I don't know, maybe that's asking you to have to into it.
And then does the town hold bonds?
I
in
don't,
other
I do not know what the
situations?
standard procedure is, so I think that's, I'll let you ask Mark and or Guy about this, and I'll probably do to both of them, so. Okay, and that means we have made it through, what he has noted, so. All right, so I'm gonna stop the sharing of that. Okay, great. And we've already talked about the Ag Committee comments. So, we could, if there is bandwidth for it, talk about some of the safety language stuff that Will sent out yesterday. It's the last item on our agenda. So are we up for that now?
Sure.
Okay, we'll do another
Oh, yeah.
little bit on that.
I could do this point.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah, basically, I went and we spent quite a few hours, a couple days looking at, well, what are people suggesting at this point? Because safety has become more of a public issue with more experience. And most of what I was finding was people were coming out with new guidelines for preventative maintenance more than for emergency response. Because there are things you can require people to put in their operating and maintenance plans that will, for solar panels, will make them more productive longer and less likely to malfunction and result in fires or the release of anything toxic. Most of the studies I could find as far as toxicities go were from 2018 or earlier, so they dealt with the earlier panels, but they all came out very, I'm talking about NREL, National Renewable Energy Laboratory, I think is what NREL stands for. And they basically said, we used our best models and everything is coming out well below any increased cancer exposure, given the limits of cancer studies really being over longer periods of time and not just based on what happens with one incident. But what they ended up saying is, but we have all these new technologies coming in and they're using different elements. So then you go and you look at, well, what are these new elements and technologies? And a lot of it is specifically directed at hardening the panels so that they're less apt to be damaged in different environments, and there's more designs available that are specifically addressing, hey, this area has a lot of sand or particulates and heavy winds, and this area has a lot of water and hail. And so the range of what's available is huge. And they are basically making better glue to hold everything in place. So even if something cracks, you're not leaking stuff out all over the place. So instead of looking at increased emergency response and containment for the panels, they're saying get out there and visually inspect visually inspect. Some places we're saying at least twice a year, and after any major weather event, including major snowstorms. So that brought up the whole thing of, if you have a solar field, have your developers say they're going, who's going to remove the snow after the snow falls, and include that in their maintenance plan. And these are industry groups making these recommendations.
Right. Yeah, I mean, but it's interesting some of it because basically if they have snow on the panels, they won't be producing. So, it's up to the operator to decide whether it's worth clearing snow, seems to me. It should fall on the operator.
Yeah.
Not anything that we need to worry about.
Well, but it hit the point,
Or specify.
yeah, for snow, that I can see why you would say that, and maybe for debris, I see that too, but the point they were making is that when there's a failure of the panels that can result in a fire or release of toxic elements, that a lot of times it's not just sudden, it's actually developing over time. And if you hold people to a visual inspection and monitoring of some of the outputs, some of the like voltages and currents and stuff, they're more likely to respond before there's a big problem. They can just address maintenance issues.
So I understand that probably avoiding a fire, that will distribute toxic stuff. So you proposed a few additional things for our operation and maintenance section.
Yeah.
And one was that the operating plan should be updated after an emergency event to make sure that sort of thing can happen again. Then there's another one about inspection reports. And find that all inspection reports and stuff should be available to the code officer. And then on the inspection reports, you've got the monitoring of critical functions, temperature, voltage, currents, automatic fire detection signal, and then they should be inspecting the facility periodically, which is exactly what you're just talking about, to look for debris, et cetera. I'm fine with this, except we have two different size projects. We have medium size and large size. And the medium size is, again, there's a couple in town, like Ed Cope has one off of Old 76. So I'm thinking of him running his place. And does he have all these things and the wherewithal to do this? Now, so I reached out to him, and what he said was actually now he's passed it off to Renovus to do his day-to-day operation. But his comments were as follows, and then we can take over. So what I would propose doing is maybe figuring out a subset. But he said, in terms of that the operating plan should be updated in the event of emergencies. It sounds reasonable, but I don't have any such procedures as far as I know.
Mhm.
Although Renovus now completely manages the system, so Renovus might. But when it's, because again, a 2-acre facility might just be owned by an individual or a small business,
Oh,
not
okay.
professional.
I thought our cutoff was bigger than that
It was 2.5 acres, I believe,
for going
from
from,
medium to large.
oh, okay, so he's under.
Yeah, he definitely said, it,
Like, does he have a full megawatt?
I don't know how much he has there. I don't know how much, I used to know. Okay, and then in terms of the inspection reports, he wrote, I am wondering why most of these inspections are needed, but I think what I answered him was, basically, you've been looking at stuff and this is, there's always a few bad actors out there, and then that's why they're needed, because usually the company wants their stuff to be working well, right? But
Yeah.
anyway, that's how he said, the owner or company is surely monitoring for a lot of this, yes, and has a maximum interest in having an efficient system that is protected from potential disasters. I think fire could be a danger with significant consequences, so monitoring potential parts of the system that cause fire are appropriate. If the performance of the system drops off, which it would if some of these factors you mentioned here are failing, the proprietors are going to know and will be fixing the issues to maximize performance. So I think he's basically saying they're going to be doing this anyway, but I think that what maybe you're saying is, yeah, probably 99% of them are, but there are some that aren't, and so the industry is recommending.
Yeah, plus they may reach a point where they go, well, we're not gonna put any more of our, money into it, so
And it-
ignore it till it's done.
Then he does this, I do not have these inspections done regularly for my panels, and it would be a burden to have them. I think you were right to suggest, because I did say to him, I can definitely see large people doing it, but I wonder about you as a small person, how do you feel? He says, yeah, I think you're right to suggest that most of this should apply to large companies who might be removed enough from their operations to notice failings. And then he thinks, obviously, that the being available to code officer is totally reasonable. So there is where my bug is, is this an unfair burden to put on these smaller facilities or not? And I wasn't sure, and he's kind of like, oh, yeah, kind of a burden.
Well, it also doesn't, unless I'm not reading this, it also doesn't say how often the inspection reports have to be conducted, does it?
No, I didn't say, I thought I was thinking along the lines of a lot of what you're saying, like the people who own it wanted to produce. Right. So they'll probably propose something adequate, because at least at the beginning, they're enthused about the project, right?
Yeah.
And so at least then they would propose something, we would know what they were proposing and then hold them to it.
This may be a dumb question. Are there any reports out there of any bad things or bad actors or whatever with solar? In terms of safety and fire.
Yeah, there are fires and releases of gases.
And some like lack of maintenance that had led to that.
Yeah, it's probably the panels that are already up are probably the more toxic, not actively toxic, but they're probably the bigger risk than what's to come.
I mean, there's a small array off of 79, Vector Magnetics put it in. I don't know if they still own it. And then there's Ed's smaller array, and there's one other one somewhere in town, I think. And I don't know I don't know if anyone has an automatic fire detection signal, for example, which is called for here. And we don't call for elsewhere that it has to be in place. So I don't know.
Yeah, I was actually kind of surprised to see that, because I was like thinking, what would they be detecting? And I guess what they look for is smoke. And then you're sort of left going, you mean like all the smoke that came over from Canada?
Right.
So I wasn't really sure what to make of that.
Yeah. I mean, I can imagine that any PV facility has a constant measure of the voltage and current, right? They're going to have that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna measure that and keep an eye on that like a hawk.
I'm less certain that they will necessarily have a temperature sensor. I'm not sure where the temperature sensor would be, on the panels or where would, I don't know. And even less likely that they're gonna have an automatic fire detection signal.
Okay, so some of the, actually the parts of the facility that are most susceptible to creating a fire or a problem are not the panels, it's the inverters and the other electrical equipment, and that's where you want them to be monitoring, especially transformers.
Right. So,
Temperature on real important.
so, okay, so
It probably doesn't have a transfer.
no, I don't think so. I don't really know. I don't know what, yeah.
Really has something on a pole.
So what I'm sort of flying top of my head here, but I would suggest perhaps that a medium facility, should update operating emergency response plans, because that, that's fine. That they have inspection reports that show monitoring of voltage and current, but for them, we drop temperature and automatic fire,
Sure.
but include it for the large ones. And they can only do a visual inspection at least annually,
Yeah.
Annual visual inspection. And then that would be the medium one.
Yeah.
And then
it
as
wouldn't
written
be-
would apply to the large ones.
Wouldn't be such a hardship. You would think they would want to do that.
But again, I think for the large one, we need to specify the time frame too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, so the annual as well. At least annual, I would think, that's fine. I don't think it's.
Yeah, it
more
was,
often.
admittedly, it was an insurance company that said twice a year
Yeah,
for large facilities. Twice a year and after any major weather event.
okay, any other comments from Aaron or Brad or anybody else on this?
I think
No.
it's a point that, they're probably looking at a lot of this anyway. And at that point, I would be saying, yes, we want to know that that's what they're doing.
Yeah, that's why the reports have to be available.
Yeah,
Okay, well, great. Then with a little bit of rewriting between now and next meeting, I think we've kind of done it on the solar law. And I will be in communication with Mark and the town board about next projects. And if they'd like us to take a look at the data center issue, we will. And if they don't, then we'll do something else. Back burner items have been whether or not to establish critical environmental areas in the town. And I'll put my old list of other things. We were looking at cell tower siding at one point, and so we will see what comes up for this year. Any other thoughts?
I'll check with the fire department, see what they would like about what to do about those solar panels
Okay,
that.
that's fine, and
It's a
communicate
safety
that to the town board and the code officer.
Okay.
Okay, so next meeting, I think would be on our sort of irregular schedule, like the third week of March. I think about being March 22nd or something like that. Let me pull up that. No, it'd be March 24th,
The Tuesday.
Tuesday, yeah. Is that okay?
No, not
No.
me.
Okay. What would be a better date for you?
25th would be fine, or the 26th.
All right, the 25th is potentially a town board meeting. Let me see if I can pull that up.
Or 23rd would be fine.
Okay. Oh, yeah, we're down currently, in the calendar, we're down for March 17th, which also would work.
Oh.
Does that work for you?
March 7th.
March 17th?
Probably not for me, but, it's for unpredictable reasons.
Okay, Brad and Aaron, are you okay for March 17th?
Sure.
It's a whole-
Fine by me.
Okay, all right, let's do Tuesday, March 17th then.
Okay.
Looking forward to April, let's not jump too many months here. That would probably put us either at the 21st, that'd be just over 4 weeks away, or the 14th. There's a watershed committee that's at 4 though. So we could either do Tuesday, April 14th, or Tuesday, April 21st, or some other day one of those weeks. Anybody have preference? Right now it's on the calendar for
No.
Tuesday, April 21st.
21st would be better for me than the
Okay.
14th.
Is 21st okay with everybody?
That works.
And,
Okay, that's all right.
Okay,
Alright, so our
21st.
We'll do, March 17th and April 21st, both Tuesdays. Until we run into a conflict, and then we'll change it.
we might not do anything.
All right. Great. Okay, well, thank you. Then I will close the meeting. Thank you all.
Good night.
Take care. Have a good night.
Night.
And Aaron, hope you feel better.
Thank you. Good night.
So I really